You've heard of gotta catch 'em all, but what about only catching a few? That's right, as you know, in Pokemon Colosseum, there's only a limited list of Pokemon that you can catch from your opponent as Shadow Pokemon. Some of these Pokemon are more helpful than others, and today we're going to rank on this tier list which ones we think are the best versus the worst. This isn't only going to take into account the kind of Pokemon, but also at what phase in the playthrough do you get it, as well as catch rate and other factors. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. First off, let's point out that these Pokemon are in rough order of how you catch them throughout your gameplay. So first off, we do have Makuhita, which I think is a solid B tier, middle of the line Pokemon. Its fighting type is definitely useful throughout your playthrough, and if you invest some time and energy into evolving it, I think it can definitely withstand that late game gameplay. Moving on to our three starters of Pokemon Colosseum, you have the second evolution of the Johto starters. Bayleaf is the worst out of the three. Right off the bat, I'm thinking C tier, maybe D tier. I just don't think it really holds up. I never choose to play with it. It's just not the move. The other two options are so much better. Croconaw, I think, is S tier. Right off the bat, being able to get Muddy Water really early in a game that is solely 2v2 Pokemon battles is absolutely vital. Feraligatr is a great evolution, and you could basically sweep 80% of the game with this Pokemon. Quilava, there's nothing wrong with Quilava, it just doesn't have that 2v2 advantage like Croconaw has, but with its attack power and speed, it is an easy A tier to take. There is nothing wrong with Quilava or Croconaw in your playthrough. Next up, we have Misdreavus, which I am really torn about. I feel like it is a solid B tier with its ghost typing, but it is hard to ignore the fact that we don't have its evolution, Mismagius. So I think let's put it at B tier. It's fine, you get it early on. It definitely helps stabilize your team for that first quarter, first half of the game. My favorite Pokemon in the world, Flaffy. Poor Flaffy. I'm going to put her at A tier, maybe B tier. I think the electric typing is fantastic, and we only get 2 or 3 of those in the entire game. But Ampharos is just not as good as it needs to be when you match up with some of those end game like Metagross and Tyranitar. They're not just good matchups. Next up is the Pyrite Town Pokemon. Slugma as a fire type I think is a solid B tier. It does have an evolution. It has a strong, solid attack, and Flamethrower early on definitely helps, but it is definitely not cracking into the A and S tier. Quagsire is A tier. Another Pokemon that can get Surf and Muddy Water with its high defense is a game changer, even if it doesn't have another evolution. Skiploom is S tier, and hear me out, okay? In a game that's all about catching Pokemon, you have very limited chances in trainer interactions. Skiploom and its evolution, being able to put Pokemon to sleep, is absolutely vital in this game, especially if you're playing a Nuzlocke or going up against one of the 3 legendary dogs. That's why it's S tier. I think it's one of the best support characters in Pokemon Colosseum. Next up on the Pyrite Town gang, Noctowl is okay. I think Fly is definitely its best move, but it just doesn't hold up as well in the second half of the game, and that's why I'm going to have to give it a C tier. Okay, let's just be honest, Furret's going to be D tier. There's nothing really special about Furret. It's a normal type, it has some nice speed, but can very easily be KO'd and just isn't very valuable. We have Yanma, which I think is a perfectly fine middle tier Pokemon, right? Let's say C, B tier because of its stats, but for some reason, I don't know if it's my fault, but always, even since I was a kid, the catch rate for this Pokemon is so hard. I remember pretending I didn't care, mashing the A button, whatever I could do to somehow magically catch this Pokemon, even when it had like 2 health. So for that reason, out of spite, I'm bumping it down to C tier. We have Remoraid, which is, again, just a solid B tier, maybe C tier choice. I just don't really think there's a lot of value and you don't really want to keep it in your party unless you have to. Now, when we're moving on to Mantine, I think Mantine has a little bit better value as a B tier Pokemon, but again, unless you have to, you're not really going to hold on to that Pokemon for the late game. Metatite is a B tier just because fighting typing with a solid evolution. I think fighting typing, especially in this generation, helps you steamroll a good portion of the game. Quillfish, D tier. Don't put in your party. There's no reason to. Its typing is okay. It's just going to be a hindrance more than anything. Same goes with Dunsparce. Poor buddy. You know, he doesn't deserve the hate that you get. But in the middle of the game, getting Dunsparce compared to some of the other Pokemon you'll have, maybe a fully evolved Slugma, Feraligatr, an Ampharos, Quagsire, he's just not going to keep up. Now, if you want to play Swablu, totally cool with that. I think Swablu is a B, maybe even pushing A tier if you can set up some good, Sword Dance or some kind of hyper offensive move to be able to sweep through some of those boss matchups. Sudowoodo, C tier. The only benefit of this guy is that in Pokemon Exegil of Darkness, his pre-evolution Bonsly absolutely steals the show, and that's why I'm not putting him as D tier. We have Hitmontop, which is another solid fighting type Pokemon. He's just gonna go in B tier. I think almost every fighting type is going into B. But maybe we put him to C just because I feel like the hit rate was incredibly difficult for him. At least at the point that you're at, he's level 38, so it definitely makes sense. Our first legendary dog, Entei, is going to be S tier. He packs way too much firepower. It's still early enough that you can justify throwing a lot of balls, and his level is not going to make it impossible to catch. Entei is your first dog and should be on your last roster of 6 Pokemon finishing out Pokemon Colosseum. After this, we have Ledian, which is just going to go into D tier. There's no reason to play bug Pokemon. Let's just be honest. It's not. Suicune, on the other hand, I'm going to put Suicune at A tier. It definitely packs the punch of an S tier, but the catch rate is quite challenging. It is the same level 40 as Entei, but for some reason, I always found so much more trouble being able to catch this Pokemon. It just, out of the 3 legendary dogs, it was definitely the most difficult. Gligar didn't hurt anybody, but still doesn't mean that he should be on the higher end of the tier list. Let's give him D. I think D's totally fine. He doesn't have his evolution, which I think would definitely bump him up to a B tier. Same thing with Stanlor. There's just not really a lot of reason to play these Pokemon, and it kind of makes you wonder what made the company choose to put these Pokemon in Pokemon Colosseum. My theory is that they put the less played Pokemon into Pokemon Colosseum to essentially force you to play with them and make a team, because you otherwise would never consider putting them on your roster in Pokemon Gold or any other games. Right off the bat, I know Piloswine deserves that S tier. Why? Being able to get Earthquake earlier on, Earthquake is just a goated move in Pokemon Colosseum. It is the worst move to play against and the best move to have. If you have, Earthquake combined with a Noctowl Fly or, some kind of Protect, you can basically steamroll the end of the game. It's just an Earthquake versus Earthquake battle, and you gotta have Piloswine in the mix. You just got to. Next up, one of the only Ice Pokemon in the game, Sneasel, just give it a solid B tier. It has good speed, good attack, but it's really not going to give you too much value as it is without its evolution. We have Ampom, which, again, why would you play this Pokemon? D tier, not even C tier. It has to be D tier. There's just not a lot of value putting this guy on your team. But, Murkrow, same thing. It's almost like they chose all the Pokemon that have evolutions in the future. So they're like, okay, Pokemon Colosseum, let's make people play these Pokemon and love them. The player base was like, no, these Pokemon suck. So they're like, okay, maybe we should make them better and give them more evolutions. Look at Gligar, Ampom. These are almost a list of Pokemon that do get evolutions in later generations. We have Fortress, which I'm going to give C tier just because it has relatively okay stats as a second evolution Pokemon, but at the same time, bug typing, who cares? Well, here's the exception. Ariados deserves a B tier. It is okay, fairly solid stats, and being able to inflict some nice poison sometimes helps if you're playing a delay game for those larger boss battles. Now, poisoning a shadow Pokemon like one of the dogs can be super risky, but it also helps, kind of wean down that HP at the end of the day. I don't think it's the worst choice in the world. I'm gonna give a hot take and give Gramble an A tier. I know it is a normal type Pokemon, but having that strong attack base, I think it's just an overall okay 6th Pokemon in your party if you need something and don't have any other better options. Vibrava, I gotta put an A tier. Maybe even S. You know what? We're gonna put Vibrava in S tier not because of that Pokemon, but you get it late enough that if you have enough XP to grind, you can get Flygon. And Flygon is a very solid Pokemon. That's an S tier Pokemon, probably one of the best fully evolved Pokemon that you're going to get before the final 2 battles. Ryoku, poor bud, he's going into A tier too. Again, there's nothing wrong with him. He's okay as your heavy hitter as an electric type Pokemon throughout this game, but I just feel like with a Feraligatr, an Entei, a Flygon, you don't really need an electric type for the rest of these battles, because after this, you're talking more Earth type, more heavy hitters that are either immune or don't take a lot of damage from electric typing. If he was one of the first legendary dogs you got, I would probably rank him as an S tier. Sunflora, B tier, just is. Why are you going to put a Sunflora into your party at this point in the game? Delibird is going dead last. I'm making a future prediction that Delibird is going to get another evolution just based off of this trend, this D tier trend. Maybe an XA, Legends, whatever, but no. Heracross is a C tier, bug type. Skarmory is B, maybe A. It has good attack, good speed. The typing is okay. You get it at level 47, but also at this point, you're probably not going to purify it. And it doesn't quite hit the mark for those final battles that we're talking level 50 and over. So maybe it would be A tier, but the point that you get it at, it'll be B tier. We have Miltank is D tier. Don't put it on your team at this point. Absol, I'm putting Absol as a B, pushing on A just because it has a good attack power. It's level 48. It's going to be a little bit lacking, but at the end of the day, if that's your 6th Pokemon in your party going into the final battles, no problem at all. Houndoom, A tier. Put him up high here. He's a high A tier. Getting this Pokemon early on, maybe getting a little bit of his shadow gauge down to unlock some fire type attacks, it's awesome. Against Metagross or other stuff, I think this is, part of your top 6 for sure. Speaking of fire type or weak to fire type, who thought Tropius would be a good C tier? Maybe. Who made these decisions to put these Pokemon in these games, especially at these phases of the games? Like, yeah, do I want Suicune or this banana Pokemon, right? Like, what the heck? Metagross would be an S tier. It's a great Pokemon, but you get it so late in the game, I don't really see a lot of value into playing it. Maybe you throw it on your team just because of the Shadow Pokemon, but I'm going to put it, it's level 50, I'm going to put it as an A tier. It's cool, but its catch rate is very difficult for that late game too. Kind of leading up the end of the list, Tyranitar is sadly going to be A tier, maybe even B tier, just because you catch Tyranitar, level 55, final battle. One, what are you going to do with it? I mean, are you going to play post game? There's not really a lot to do there. So I don't think, even though it's an S tier Pokemon, it really doesn't deserve to be in S tier because of the placement throughout your gameplay. I could even make the argument to B tier, but let's just keep him at A tier for now. It causes you a lot of trouble. It has a very high catch rate. And then there's some other miscellaneous Pokemon here. Smeargle, I don't even remember when I catch Smeargle, but he's going D tier. Ursaring, also D tier. Maybe give him C tier, but I'm trying to think, when do we even get these Pokemon? Let me look this up real quick. The Snag'em hideout, I kind of forgot that was a thing. I definitely forgot that was a thing. Well, we have Shuckle, who, again, why is Shuckle a post-game buddy? He's D tier. Now, Togepi evolving into Togetic. Togetic is solid, but I'm going to give it a C tier just because at this point, I'm pretty sure it's the very last Pokemon you would catch. So maybe if it was like a 75% up here with the Grand Bull, when you're catching it during that point of your gameplay, yeah, that would be a lot of fun. I could definitely see you using that, but at this point, no. I think your final 6 Pokemon running into the final battle is going to be Feraligatr, your fully evolved Skiploom, Entei, Piloswine, Flygon, and I would put Houndoom, maybe Suicune on there, maybe Ryoku, I don't really know, but definitely those are your top 5 for sure. But let me know in the comments below, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Did I overrank a Pokemon you think is trash? And did I trash a Pokemon you think is goated? Let me know. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.